Robert Plank Show, episode 240, Web Design and SEO. Optimize your website using cutting edge and common sense tweaks and factors with Jeremy Knauff. Hey everybody,
Okay.
and welcome back to the program. We're here with Jeremy Knauff, and he's the founder of Spartan Media, and we're going to have a lot of fun today. And Jeremy is a proud father, husband, and a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and he has spent over 17 years helping companies create the exposure they need to build the business they deserve through SEO, social media, and web design. So, Mr. Jeremy, how are things today?
Things are outstanding. How about yourself?
Can't complain, better than ever, moving from one thing to the next, and growing stuff and just doing what needs to be done. And so you have this company called Spartan Media. So can you maybe tell me about what it is that you guys do best and what it is you guys do that makes you stand out?
Absolutely. So our core strength is, we do everything digital, but our core strength is web design and search engine optimization. That's kind of how I got my start in the industry when I first got started nearly 20 years ago. And we've kind of continued to build upon that and branch out into other things as well.
Because web design has changed, just slightly in the last 20 years, right? SEO just slightly in 20 years.
Yeah, just a little bit here and there.
So cool. So do you have you thought about, or do you can you tell us maybe what that was like back then, and maybe how you got your start, and maybe how you got those first few clients and had those first few successes of yours?
Absolutely. So I'll break it down into the two different sides because for the most part, they generally are separated. Most SEO professionals are generally not web designers and vice versa. As far as the web design goes, when that first started, when you designed a website back then, you would have to break out Notepad and hand code all of the HTML. Nowadays you've got all of these awesome tools that, some soccer mom can go and start a website without learning how to code. And, those things weren't around back then. We also had a lot of limitations as far as bandwidth. Everybody kind of takes for granted today the speed that we've got. You on your mobile device, you've got a faster connection than most of us had in the office in the beginning.
Right.
And now we look at some of the advances where, if you've got a website, you have to have a mobile-friendly website. That was one of the huge things that Google's been pushing for a while, and then that ties into the SEO side of things. As far as SEO goes, that's a whole nother level there. We went from a time when the search engines would look for the content on your page and analyze how many times a keyword was mentioned in the content, for example. Nowadays, they're using artificial intelligence to actually figure out not only what your content's about, but whether or not you're an authoritative author on the topic and what other things the searcher might be considering. So, for example, if you're searching for pizza places, right, that's generally going to take place on a mobile device. So Google knows that you're probably looking for an actual address, not just articles from, other pizza related businesses. So we've seen a dramatic shift in terms of the complexity, both on the web design side and on the SEO side. And that's only going to continue.
And it almost sounds like it's like, well, back in the dark ages, you had to, code pages by hand, and it was pretty easy to game the search engines and stuff. And then you think, oh, well, someday it's going to be easier. Someday it's going to be just, any soccer mom could do it, like you said. But then it turns out that, well, now that it's easier, now that there's new rules, right? Now we got to be mobile friendly and have SSL, and now, there's going to be humans looking at it and stuff like that. So it's almost like I was promised at some point that the hard way was going to be over, right? That all this coding, like I was going to move past this, but it's like, geez, a whole nother set of problems there. So okay, so you mentioned that now there's like these tools and stuff that will let people make web pages themselves. So why don't they? Do people come across sort of roadblocks as far as like they say, okay, well maybe I can make a web page themselves, but do you see something sort of usually happen when people try to do it themselves?
Yeah, you could definitely do it yourself, and depending on the competitiveness of the niche that you're in, that may be acceptable. If you've got like a little craft shop that you sell things, kind of as a part-time gig, then maybe it's not that big of a deal. But if you're running a business that you've got other competitors who are also very serious about getting the market share that you think you want, then the off-the-shelf WYSIWYG kind of stuff's not going to cut it for you, like the Wix or the Squarespace or things like that, or even for that matter, most of the WordPress. When you look at a lot of the websites that you see your typical developer make, they look beautiful, but they run really slow and they're not really optimized. So we talked a little bit ago about how Google's been looking at mobile. They've also been looking at page speed as a factor. So if your site's not loading quickly enough, your bounce rate tends to go up, right? And bounce rate is one of the factors that Google looks at in determining how relevant a particular page is to searchers. So if I go to a page and I leave right away, that's going to indicate to Google that I didn't find what I was looking for. So if you've got two sites and one's a little bit faster than the other one, it's generally going to edge out the slower site in the rankings. And that's where a lot of these tools, like I said, the Squarespace, the Wix, they don't compete in that regard. You've got to have a site that's beautiful, but then you've also got to refine it to where it's operating as fast as possible.
Awesome, and I like the way that you sort of explain that, in that a lot of people maybe don't even know that there's a problem, because maybe they either they had some other designer make it, or they use the Wix or something, and the site looks great, but like you said, it might look great but then be slow. And slow for us might be a different sort of idea than slow for the search engines, right? For us, we say, oh, well, that web page took 5-10 seconds, whatever, but still too slow for the search engines. Or maybe it looks okay, but then when the search engines look at it, they say, well, that all that stuff isn't optimized. So it sounds like what you're saying is that people might even not know that there's a problem, or they might not even know why they're ranking super low or having difficulty getting traffic.
Absolutely. And it's also a factor with the traffic that you actually have. So not just the ranking, but once they're there. There was a study done by Amazon, and they tested the load speed of their pages, and they found, I forget the exact numbers, and obviously scale is a factor in this case, but when their site would be like a tenth of a second slower, which doesn't seem even perceivable to humans, but as little as a tenth of a second slower, it would have millions of dollars of impact on their bottom line. So, you've got that other aspect to look at as well.
That's freaking crazy, man. I had no idea. And it's like, well, for us, maybe it's not that huge of a scale, but I mean, if it's like a few percentages of Amazon's income, then I mean, that could be a few percentages of our income over time. And so we listed a few of these things so far, like like the load time and stuff like that. Like, do you have if you're either maybe looking at someone's website, and thinking of like things that can be improved, or making a website, do you have like sort of a quick checklist of some kind to go through and like know that you're hitting all the right marks?
Absolutely. So the first thing, there's two tools you can take a look at. There's the Google PageSpeed tool, and on that same, when you go to that tool, you'll also see a link on there to their mobile friendly test, right? And you just plug in your URL, and it will do a quick scan, run through the system, and analyze it. And it will tell you, so from the page speed, it will tell you how fast it's running on a scale of 1 to 100. It'll also tell you the things that you can improve. Most of those things, if you're moderately technical, you can probably start adjusting yourself. Some of them, depending on what it is, you'll probably need a developer for. And then the next tool, like I said, that there's a link to the other tool from that page for the mobile responsive test. And what that does is that analyzes the web page from the perspective of how is it going to perform on a mobile device. So for example, tap targets. If you're trying to touch, you've probably experienced this before, you try and touch on a link on a website on your iPhone or your Android, and it's so tiny that you can't hit it, right? Have you ever seen that before?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Okay, so that's one of the examples of the things that they test for. And then obviously the speed is another big factor, which is tested in the previous tool. An area where there's a lot of problems is people will upload. This is where the handy little tools cause problems. Say you've got WordPress or Wix or Squarespace, and you upload an image. Most people don't even realize that that image is a certain size, right? So you're looking at this website on a phone, which you're depending on the model, you're looking at a couple of hundred pixels wide, but you might have a an image on that page that's like 4,000 pixels wide. Well, that's burning up bandwidth. That's wasting the processing power, which slows down the load speed. So it's little things like that these tools will give you some indications as to where your weak areas are. To really get it dialed in, though, you're going to need somebody who really knows all of the little details to look for.
Awesome. So the Google PageSpeed tool to sort of give people those lists of things that could be wrong, and then from there the mobile-friendly test to see all that. And so you mentioned there that maybe they can at least see what's wrong, or maybe they can fix one or two things. But to really get the important stuff taken care of, they should have a real web designer or a real agency such as yourself do it. And so I mean, so like, what do you prefer? Like, if someone comes to you, do you prefer that they already have a website, or are you the kind of agency where you spruce up an existing website, or do you prefer to throw it out and start over? Like, what do you guys usually do?
Right. So whatever the situation is, I mean, our sole mission is to help the client accomplish their goals. So in some cases, they may already have a website that we have to work within those constraints. From a development standpoint, it's usually best to start from scratch because, like I mentioned, most developers, they don't have a clue when it comes to SEO. They may make a beautiful website, but the search engines, it's not optimized so that the search engines can crawl everything. And then you've also got the information architecture, how your content itself is actually structured. So whenever possible, we like to basically start from a clean slate. That way, that you're getting as much traction as you possibly can. And then from that point, we'll evaluate what their goals are and then figure out what needs to take place in order to reach those goals.
Okay, cool. Fair enough. So if they're really committed to that site, great. But what you guys prefer is to start fresh. And so, I mean, do you see a lot of that? Because it sounds like there's almost like the mechanical side of it, like what Google sees. But then it also sounds like there's like the user experience, I guess, kind of thing, and where it's where things need to be like laid out in a certain way, or certain things in the navigation. So do you have any sort of like system or a thought process as far as fixing up the navigation and fixing up the order of things?
It really comes down to figuring out what it is that the user wants, right? And this is an area that even most designers get wrong, where think about you as a customer. You're coming to a website for whether it's a particular product or information about something. You're coming there for a particular goal, right? But if you look at most websites, what do most websites tell you? Like right off the bat is the first thing that they're telling you.
When you come to what kind of website?
For the most part, any website, any business website, right? You come to the website and the first thing they want to tell you is how great they are, how they're the best, and they've been doing this for 20 years, and all of these great things about them. But that's not what anybody cares about. When somebody comes to a website, they're coming there for their own needs. So that's an example of basically setting the stage for the customer, not for the owner, right? So that's one of the areas. The other area is kind of understanding their intent. So somebody's coming there. Not everyone is coming for the same purpose. So maybe somebody comes in because they came in on a search term on some article that was unrelated to like a buying decision. They were just coming in from an informational type search. They're going to have a very different intent than the person who had searched for, something about buying that particular product. So you have to figure out what the particular visitor is trying to accomplish and route them in a way that's going to be most efficient for them.
Awesome. That makes sense. So it sounds like the tendency is for people to be sort of centered around the business and talking about how great they are, but what people really need to do is number one, make it about what the users as a whole want, and then route users with specific intents. And so, sort of to make sure that we're understanding this, do you have off the top of your head know of a client where maybe their website was set up in a certain way, and then you kind of reconfigured it based on those two things?
Actually, yeah. One of my biggest success stories was exactly that situation. They came into us, prior to engaging us, they had worked with a big New York ad agency who didn't really understand digital. And they built them this big elaborate website, but it was all built in Flash. I don't know if you remember that. I know it's for the most part been phased out.
So that's from back in
But
the dark ages.
it's still floating around in bits and pieces here, but I think for the most part, all of the browsers have pretty much dropped support for it. But their entire website was built in Flash, so that meant that the search engines could not see a single thing. They couldn't see any of their content. So they got zero organic traffic, and they were running quite a significant spend on PPC at the time, and their costs were through the roof because Google couldn't look at the website and assign any kind of quality score to it because they couldn't see any of the content. So what we did was we went in there, and again, this was a case of the website where they were talking all about the company and not really thinking of the visitors' needs. So we went in, we rebuilt the whole thing from scratch, nice, slick HTML and CSS, optimized so that the search engines could find everything, get to everything very easily. We structured pages in such a way that it would answer all of the questions that visitors had. There was a nice funnel, nice flow of information. They could go as, it would start off with a small bit of information, and then it would give them the option to dig deeper into whatever it was that was interesting to them on that particular topic. And we basically took them from they were spending thousands on PPC, and if they were lucky, getting maybe 4 leads a month. Turn that around to where they were generating about $80,000 on a bad month, and they were outranking all of their competitors, and these were all multi-million-dollar companies, outranking their competitors for their own names.
Crazy. And
Indeed.
and so just a matter of sort of running it through that list and cleaning things up and making things up to date. It paid off in all kinds of ways, right? Like you take all that the flash off of there, which like looks okay, I guess, but make it more of like an up to date thing. Make it say the right things, and then now not only does it increase those organic rankings, but it's awesome that it also takes that those pay per click costs down there as well. So like all kinds of things paid off there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was a win all the way around for them. They were exceedingly happy about that.
So, I mean, when you deal with these sorts of clients and you see, the good and the bad and the ugly, I guess, as far as the web pages, like, is there one specific area where everyone needs to be aware of things? Like, I know we mentioned like the load time and the user experience and the SEO, but is there one thing that like most people are getting wrong these days?
Yeah, I think that definitely the load speed is something that pretty much everybody's got way wrong. Um, you know, WordPress is probably it is the most common CMS, which I forget the exact stats. Somewhere around 50 or 60% of all websites are run on WordPress. And the tendency of most people, because they're not developers, is when they want a particular functionality or a particular design element, the easy thing to do is just throw in some plugin. Well, that plugin is loaded at least a CSS file and a couple of extra JavaScript files. Every plugin that does that, you're dropping your speed dramatically. So that's the most common, and if you've got a developer, the easiest to fix. The mobile responsive is still another one that's pretty common as far as a problem goes, because a lot of businesses that aren't really staying up to date with what matters in digital marketing, they don't realize how important it is. Google recently rolled over to what they're calling the mobile first index. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Okay. So for a while, they had a separate index for mobile and desktop. So what they've recently done, it was just within the last couple of months, they basically rolled all of the results are being driven from their mobile index. So which means if your site doesn't rank or isn't mobile responsive, it's most likely going to be outranked by a site that is mobile responsive if where all other factors are the same. So
Crazy.
that's it is, and that's something that's going to affect a tremendous amount of business owners who, I mean, for obvious reasons, they don't keep up on the industry. They've got their own business to run. But that's a huge area that most people are getting wrong right now, and they're going to get a huge wake up call pretty soon.
And then I don't want to get too down into the geeky rabbit hole, but if there's this mobile first index, and if Google is sort of prioritizing that, then if a site is designed with like desktop first CSS as opposed to mobile first CSS, does that mean that because that'll sort of render faster in mobile, does that mean that mobile first CSS and design will also outrank?
Yeah, yeah. In most cases, if all other factors are the same, then the mobile responsive site is going to outrank the non-mobile responsive site.
Crazy. So I mean, all the more reason to stay up on the latest and greatest things, and even if a lot of us aren't computer geeks, to use an agency like yours to keep up on the latest and greatest stuff, for them, and to focus on the important stuff and not focus on the sort of voodoo stuff. And so I want to talk about this company you have, Spartan Media. So can you sort of tell us about the company itself and what you guys are up to lately?
Absolutely. Um, like I mentioned earlier, we're a web design SEO firm. That's our core focus. We do other things as well, pretty much anything digital. So email marketing, social media, Facebook, the whole nine yards there. Starting to dabble in video, but that's not a big portion of our business right now. But basically, yeah, I mean, we work with anybody from small mom and pops all the way up to larger companies in the, $50 million range. So pretty broad in that regard.
Okay, and then and the place to find that website is at spartanmedia.com, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. SpartanMedia.com.
Cool. And then so then when people come to Spartan Media, what do you want them to do exactly? Like I see like there's a place for them to get a free consultation. So is that the goal there, or what? Everyone listening, like when they go to spartanmedia.com, what should they do once they're there?
Sure, absolutely. If they've got, if they're a business owner who's serious about growing their business, maybe not just picking up a few more customers here and there, but if they really want to dominate their market, then by all means, get in touch with us, and we'll get down, sit down, have a consultation, see what your situation is, and see if there's a good fit there.
Awesome. So when they go there and they schedule that sort of consultation, I mean, what should is there anything that they should sort of know going in, or are there any like questions you're going to ask that they should know about, or like what can they expect when they sort of book this phone call with you?
Okay, so we're a lot different than most companies that do what we do. We don't like we're not going to get on there and just try and sell them something. What we want to do is we want to dig deep into their situation. What are the goals that they're trying to accomplish? What are the challenges that they're trying to overcome? Figure out what needs to be done for them. In some cases, it may be a case where it's just not a fit. I was talking to a guy recently who, he wanted to pick up maybe one or two more customers a month, and I said, it's just unfortunately it's not a fit. Like I could charge you money to do something, but you're not going to get a return on investment out of this. So we want to really evaluate their situation and their goals and find something that's going to be beneficial for them just as much as it is for us.
Awesome. I like that attitude and that strategy where like people, so that way people don't have to worry about, oh, is there going to be some sort of slick salesman, so they can just get the call figured out and sort of see if you're a good fit and see what the goals are, and see so if everyone can win. And are there any other websites, any other links that you want the listeners today to go to, or is spartanmedia.com the place to be?
Well, Spartan Media is certainly the main place for us, but you can also catch me over at Search Engine Journal. I'm an author over there. That's the search engine industry's largest publication. And then obviously you can connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, everything like that.
All kinds of cool stuff. Awesome. So make sure everyone look up Spartan Media on Facebook and Twitter, and then be on the lookout for Jeremy's articles on Search Engine Journal. That's Jeremy Knauff. That's spelled Knauff. Just make sure you find his articles, and definitely make sure to go to SpartanMedia.com. And if you're at all curious about some of the stuff we talked about, if you think that you could have lower PPC costs, if you think that you want higher SEO rankings, if you want more traffic, you want more leads, it might just be a matter of one of these techie guys like Jeremy looking at your site and saying, okay, well these things need to make more sense for the visitors, or we need to make some tweaks and maybe speed up some of those slow plugins or make it better for mobile. There might just be a few of these geeky things where Jeremy and his team can go ahead and work their magic, and then that means a much better website and much, all those good things, more traffic for you. So make sure everyone go to spartanmedia.com. That's SPARTANMEDIA.com, spartanmedia.com. And thanks, Jeremy, so much for stopping by today and sharing some of these breakthroughs and all the things that you had to share with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Robert Plank. I really appreciate you as a listener. Now, to get all the links and resources from today's episode, go to robertplank.com/240. That's robertplank.com/240, and have a wonderful time once you're there.